Hello, my friends. Before we begin tonight's story, tell me in the comments what helps you fall asleep the fastest. A good story, the sound of rain, or something else. And if these moments bring you peace, you're welcome to subscribe. I'll be here again tomorrow night. Now, let's get comfortable. It started, like most things do, quietly. A little past midnight, sometime in October, when the walls of the apartment felt closer than usual, and the silence between cars on the wet street stretched longer than I could name. I had left the window open, not for the breeze, but for proof that the world still moved. Somewhere down the alley, a delivery truck backed up, and further off, a dog barked once, and then nothing. I wasn't trying to sleep. Not really. I was just trying not to feel like the night was swallowing me. So I turned on the radio. Not my phone, not a playlist. The real thing. An old table radio with a dented dial that sat half hidden behind a dusty plant on the windowsill. It crackled when I turned it on, the way things do when they've been waiting a long time. And then I found her. No intro, no music, just her voice, low, measured, like someone reading thoughts rather than words. I didn't catch the name of the program, if there even was one. Just the sound of her saying, "It's late, you're here. That's enough for now." That was all. And then she let the silence in. Not dead air, intentional stillness. I sat on the edge of the bed, sockless, with the lamp off, and listened like someone being led into a room he hadn't known was open. The voice spoke, now and then gentle stories, sometimes small reflections. Never dramatic, never urgent. Just things like, "I saw a woman today feeding pigeons with such grace you'd think she'd trained them," or "There's a kind of comfort in being the only one awake." I never heard music, just her voice, and the long, calming space between. I started tuning in each night after that. 12, 3 a.m. to around 1. Never longer. She didn't say goodbye, just faded out. And I began to rely on her in a way I couldn't quite admit to myself. The voice became a ritual. Not for sleep. I rarely fell asleep before 2. But for stillness. For company. She never said where she broadcast from. I imagined a small booth, maybe in a basement. A single red light blinking outside the door. Steam from a mug. And her voice, steady, deliberate, holding strangers together across rooftops. I never tried to find the station online. I didn't want to know if it was a real program or some odd local signal with too little range and too much heart. If I named it, it might break. So I left it unnamed. And then, one night, maybe a month after I started listening, she said something different. No story, no quiet memory, just, "Tonight, I'm reading letters from people who never sent them," and my chest went still. She continued, her tone unchanged. Calm, caring, no names, no dates. Just words someone needed to say, even if they couldn't. I listened. And she read them, slowly, gently, words about regret, about love that was never returned, about people missed but never told. The kind of letters you write in the middle of the night, when you're sure no one will ever read them. And I sat there, breath caught, because one of them was mine. Word for word, not paraphrased, not close. Mine. A letter I had written 2 years ago and never sent, typed, then deleted. I had told no one. I had never printed it. And yet, there it was, on air. Read aloud by a voice I didn't know, but somehow trusted. When she finished reading, there was silence. A little longer than usual. Then she said, "Some words find their way anyway, and you're not strange for still needing them." I didn't move, didn't breathe, just stared at the small red glow of the radio dial like it had become something alive. I didn't know what to make of it. Still don't. But that night, as the program faded out, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Not fear, not wonder, just held. Like someone I'd never met had reached across the dark and found me. The next morning, I woke with that uneasy kind of stillness, like when you leave a conversation and realize you said more than you meant to. Only I hadn't said anything, not out loud, not to anyone. I sat at the kitchen table long after the coffee had gone cold, staring at the tiled floor and letting my mind do what it does best. Explain things away. Coincidence. Similar phrasing. A stranger, maybe, who'd written the same kind of letter. I convinced myself of it by noon. People think similar thoughts all the time, don't they? Especially in the quiet hours. Regret isn't original. Nostalgia, even less so. I tried to let it go. I even skipped the program the next night, left the radio off, kept the window shut, forced myself to fall asleep early, even if it meant lying still in the dark for over an hour. But I woke at 12:28, like someone had tapped me on the shoulder. The room felt flat without her voice, and even though I said I wouldn't, my hand reached over and turned the dial static. Then warmth, then her, like nothing had changed. "Tonight," she said, "we're keeping things gentle." And she read a story, something quiet, something about a man who collected broken watches just to keep them from feeling useless. It made no sense. And yet, I understood every word. The way she told it, you didn't need logic, just patience. She didn't mention letters that night, or the next. But by the third night, she said something I couldn't ignore. "Some of you are writing again. Some of you are wondering if I'm speaking directly to you. Maybe I am, maybe not. But if you feel something move when I speak, that's enough." I leaned forward. The air in the room shifted. She continued softly. "Sometimes, when we send things into the world, we don't need a response. We just need to know they didn't disappear." And I thought, how could she have known that? That's exactly what I had felt. That my words had gone out once, and all I wanted was for them not to vanish. The letter she read before the one that was mine hadn't been printed. It hadn't been sent. And yet somehow she'd had it. Or something so close it made no difference. Maybe it was a trick, a performance. Some elaborate narrative designed to feel personal, but it didn't feel like a show. It felt quiet, measured, real. That week, I started recording the broadcasts. I bought blank cassettes from a corner store that still carried them cheap plastic cases with labels I never filled in. I didn't know what I was looking for. A pattern, maybe? A message beneath the messages. I played them back during the day, slow, static-filled, imperfect copies of her calm voice. And what I found wasn't answers, just more recognition, as if she were holding pieces of lives that didn't belong to her, but carried them anyway, like a trusted friend holding on to things we're not ready to carry alone. I began writing again. Not to her, just in general. Small thoughts, memories, phrases I'd never said out loud. I didn't send them anywhere. Just let them exist. Let them breathe on the page. Because somehow, deep down, I'd begun to believe that if I wrote something honest, maybe, just maybe, she'd read it one night. Not for performance, not for validation, but for me. So I kept listening, and the silence between her words started to feel less like empty space and more like the sound of someone waiting with you patiently until you're ready to speak. It happened on a Tuesday. One of those days that feels like it started without you. Like the city had gotten up and dressed while you were still deciding whether to get out of bed. I moved through it, half present. The coffee was too bitter. The elevator too slow. The light in my office buzzed slightly, not loud enough to report, just enough to notice. But through it all, I carried this quiet hum of anticipation because the nights were different now. Each day had a shadow behind it, not a dark one, but a waiting one. A soft question. What will she read tonight? That night, just after midnight, her voice arrived like always warm, even unhurried. I had the tape in the recorder already. I barely breathed. She began. This letter was never addressed. No date. Just a single line written across the top. If I ever find the right words, maybe I'll be able to leave. I sat up. The rest of the room fell away. I hadn't written that sentence. Not yet. But I'd thought it, word for word. The day before, while sitting alone at the kitchen table, I'd stared at the blank page, pen resting in the fold, and thought, if I could just find the right words, I could let it go. I could move on. And now, here it was, out loud. Her voice continued slowly, gently reading a letter about wanting to let go of someone who hadn't been in your life for years, but somehow still lived in the smallest spaces. A certain smell, a song that plays by accident, the shape of someone's handwriting that looks just close enough to theirs. You're not with me, she read, but somehow I still check for your name in crowds. Like some part of me didn't get the message that it's over. I swallowed hard. My hands curled slightly in my lap. It wasn't just similar. It wasn't just familiar. It was exactly what I'd never said. I keep thinking that forgetting means disrespect. But maybe holding on too tightly is the greater disservice. Maybe I need to stop building altars to people who've left. The silence after that was heavy, but not cruel. Like she knew some of us would need time to sit with it. And then she said, some things only live as long as we keep dusting them off. Maybe you don't have to keep polishing this one. The recording light flickered. The cassette spun on. But I wasn't thinking about the tape anymore. I was thinking about how. How could she know? Not just what I'd written, but what I'd almost written. What I'd carried, but never let surface. Was someone reading my drafts? Was this a trick? Was it magic? Or was it something quieter? Something less explainable, but more true? Maybe she didn't know me. Maybe she just knew pain. And silence. And the weight of not saying what you most need to. Maybe she was just really, really good at listening. Even when no one was speaking, I didn't sleep that night. I didn't need to. I just lay there, wide awake in the soft darkness, staring at the ceiling and thinking, if someone can feel this much without ever being seen, maybe I'm not as invisible as I thought. And maybe, just maybe, I owe her an answer. I wrote it around 2:17 a.m. The kind of hour where the world feels quieter than it should, like the walls are listening, and the night might keep your secret if you're gentle enough with it. I didn't mean to. I'd been sitting in the kitchen with a lukewarm mug of tea, trying to pretend I hadn't been waiting for her voice again. The radio was off, the tape recorder empty, but the silence was full. And I felt it not pressure, exactly, more like permission, a soft nudge from somewhere just outside the edge of language. Write it, even if no one reads it. So I did. I found a sheet of paper from the drawer under the sink, the one where expired coupons and old takeout menus go to die. It had a water stain in one corner and a slight tear near the top, but it felt right, like it had been waiting to be used for something that mattered. I didn't start with "Dear." I didn't sign it. I didn't give it structure or punctuation that made it clean. It came out more like a breath that had been held too long. I wrote, I keep thinking I'm okay until something quiet proves me wrong. A drawer I open and find your handwriting. A coat I haven't worn since the last time I saw you. And sometimes, a voice on the radio that sounds like someone who never judged me. I don't know if this is closure or just another attempt at releasing the thing I never really held. But here it is. Not to make sense, not to forgive. Just to stop needing to explain why I still look for you in voices that don't know your name. That was it. I didn't reread it. I folded the page once, no envelope, and left it on the kitchen table beside the cassette recorder. I don't know why. Maybe part of me believed she'd find it there. Maybe I wanted to believe the radio could take things in as well as send them out. In the morning, I didn't move it, didn't throw it away. Just let it stay, like an offering to the quiet. That night, I tuned in again. Her voice arrived right on time. Familiar, grounding, kind. She didn't read letters. Not that night. Just told a story about a man who left messages for himself on sticky notes around his apartment, not reminders to do things, but to feel them. Notes like, "You're not as tired as you think. It's okay to miss her and still not want her back. Some aches just mean you were honest." And I felt it again, that ache. Not pain, not anymore. Just a stretch of honesty in a body not used to naming things. At the end of the broadcast, she paused. The kind of pause that means something's coming. Then she said, "Sometimes a message doesn't need to be open to matter. Sometimes writing it is enough." I froze. The cassette recorder clicked as it stopped. The kitchen light flickered once, then steadied, and I felt, not seen exactly, but felt like someone had placed a hand gently on the air between us. I went to bed with the letter still sitting on the table. I didn't burn it, didn't hide it, just let it live, because now I knew some things don't need to be sent to arrive. The next few nights felt quieter, even when her voice was there. It wasn't that she said less, though she did, but that the pauses between her words seemed to carry more weight, like someone slowly gathering their things before a long goodbye. I noticed it first on a Thursday. She opened the broadcast like always, no fanfare, no title, just You made it through the day. That's enough for tonight." But she didn't follow with a letter. No story. Just silence. Long and unbroken. I thought maybe the station had cut out. Maybe the signal was weak. I checked the dial, adjusted the antenna, turned the volume up slightly. But no, she was still there, breathing, present, holding the stillness like it was part of the show. Eventually, she spoke again. "Some nights don't need words. You've already said enough just by staying." And that was it. The rest of the hour drifted between short phrases and gentle breathing. She described the sound of a radiator clicking on in the next room, the way a coat feels heavier when it's warm inside and cold outside. She didn't say goodbye. She never did. But that night, I felt it, a loosening, like the shape of the program was starting to shift. The next night, she read just one letter, short, only a few lines. It said, "I'm still afraid to be known, but I'm more afraid now of being forgotten. So if you're reading this, thank you for proving I exist." She let that hang. No analysis, no interpretation, just the words, bare and open. And I realized she wasn't there to fix anything. She never was. She was there to hold space, like a nightlight left on in a quiet house. Not because someone's afraid of the dark, but because it helps to know something is still glowing. I found myself waking earlier after that. Not by choice, just ready. As if my body had started to move with a new rhythm, one that didn't depend on being held in place. I still tuned in, still listened, but I didn't need it the same way. That frightened me at first. The idea that I was letting go of something that had once felt like survival, but maybe it wasn't fear. Maybe it was just growth. On Sunday night, she said, "You don't have to keep coming back here, but you're welcome anytime." And I smiled. Because it sounded like something you say to someone you've watched heal. Not completely, but enough to stand without leaning. I still hadn't sent the letter, not really. It still sat folded on the windowsill, a little more curled at the edges now, slightly faded where the sun had kissed it each morning, but I didn't feel the need to send it. Just knowing it existed, knowing it was written, was enough. Some stories, I was learning, didn't need endings, just quiet places to rest. That night, the air felt different. Not heavy, not electric, just still. Like the space before the curtain falls, not the moment itself, but the soft breath the audience takes when they know the final line has already passed. I turned on the radio at 12:03. The dial glowed the same way it always had. Warm, steady, quiet. But I felt something in my chest before a single word was spoken. And then she spoke. "Tonight is a short night." That's all she said at first. No story, no letter, no slow build, just that. A declaration, not sad, not final, just true. I leaned forward slightly, unsure what to expect. The hum of the frequency beneath her voice was softer tonight, like it didn't want to interrupt. Then she continued. "There comes a moment when what you needed to hear turns into what you already believe. And when that happens, you don't need the voice anymore. You just need to remember that you listened." The room was so quiet, I could hear my own heartbeat. She wasn't speaking to a crowd. She never had. This was personal, not dramatic, just deliberate, like a light being dimmed rather than switched off. Maybe you've written something, or said something, or even just thought something that made you feel less alone. That's the whole point of all this. Not answers, not applause, just reminders that your quiet matters, that someone heard you, even if only once. I sat completely still, not because I was afraid to move, but because every word felt like it had been placed in the room with care, and I didn't want to disturb it. "This will be the last night," she said. "Not forever, just for now. The light's still on, but it's okay to leave the room." I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I just breathed. And I think that's what she wanted. Not grief, not need, but peace. She didn't play music, didn't fade out with fanfare, just paused. And then added, "If you're listening, thank you for letting me sit beside you in the quiet. You're safe to keep going." And then the silence came. Not static, not white noise, just absence. Not hollow, but full. Like the kind of silence that stays behind after someone kind has left the room. I let it sit for a long time before turning the radio off. The red light on the dial glowed for a few seconds longer before dimming to nothing. That was it. No message, no return tomorrow, just done. But not gone. Never gone. I stood, stretched, walked to the window, and looked out at the city. Same street, same trees, same glow from across the rooftops. Only now, the quiet wasn't something I waited for. It was something I carried inside. Like her voice had folded itself into me, and I would never have to tune in to find it again. Some weeks passed. The nights didn't change, not really. The city still breathed beneath my window. The buses still passed every hour or so. The cat 2 buildings over still curled up in the same glowing window. But inside, things felt different. Not emptier, just less waiting. I still reached for the radio some nights, out of habit. My fingers would hover over the dial, and I'd pause not out of sadness, but from a kind of still respect. I didn't need to hear her voice to feel it anymore. It had settled into me like the hum of something once held, still warm in your hands long after it's gone. I walked more. In the evenings, no headphones, no distractions, just the city and my steps, and the way the pavement sounded softer at night. I started noticing things again, the way the lamplight puddled around street corners, the way people talked more gently when they thought no one was listening. I even started writing again, not out of longing, but out of presence. Tiny notes, thoughts, unsent letters, just for me, just so they could live outside my chest. I kept them in a box near the window, not hidden, not labeled, just kept. One night, maybe a month after the last broadcast, I opened the drawer beneath the sink and found that same crumpled sheet of paper, the first letter I'd written, the one with the water stain, the one that started it all. I unfolded it slowly, expecting to feel some kind of sting, some kind of return to the ache. But instead, I smiled, because I didn't feel like that person anymore. And yet, I was still him, just steadier, softer, less afraid of hearing his own thoughts in the dark. I sat with that letter for a long time. No edits, no rewrites, just the way it was. And then, without really meaning to, I whispered aloud, "You got through it." Not as a celebration, not as a finish line, but as a recognition, a simple marking of time. That voice I used to hear hers, I could still recall it with ease. I didn't need recordings. She lives somewhere in the quiet now, in the way I paused before writing, in the way I breathed slower at midnight, in the way I spoke to myself when no one was around. Some voices don't vanish when they go silent. They just settle deeper. They become the silence. And I think maybe that was the point all along. I don't know if she's still out there, speaking to someone else. Maybe she was never real in the way I thought. Or maybe she was more real than anything I'll ever hold. But either way, when the city gets too loud, or the night feels too wide, I still listen not to the signal, but to what she taught me to hear. Your quiet is not emptiness. It's where you begin.